All right, welcome back in Alive Now. I'm Austin Westfall. A live look at the White House on this Saturday evening. 9 minutes past 7 in the nation's capital, 9 minutes past 4 out west. We have been following closely a story that broke yesterday. A federal website that used to feature information on vaccines, testing, and treatment for COVID-19 has been transformed into a page supporting the theory that the pandemic originated with a lab leak. The Covid.gov website shows a photo of President Trump walking between the words lab and leak under a White House heading. It mentions that Wuhan, China, which is where the coronavirus first began spreading, is home to a research lab with a history of conducting virus research with what they call inadequate biosafety levels. Infectious disease expert Dr. Peter Chin Hong is here. I know you've seen the website. We were talking about this a little bit yesterday offline. The website mentions 5 bullet points near the top of it, Peter. What I want to do with you today is go through each bullet point one by one. Here they are. The first one says as follows: the virus possesses a biological characteristic that is not found in nature. True?
Not true. That was early in the pandemic. There was this cleavage site called the furin cleavage site that seemed really wacky, and people thought for sure that didn't seem to be part of a natural virus. But then subsequent studies later on after that those early 2020 studies showed that actually in other coronaviruses, that furin cleavage site was present. And in fact, many scientists believe that you can't just make that in a lab. In fact, if you try to make something in the lab, that particular site would disappear.
So the second bullet point, and we will go through these, it says, data shows that all COVID-19 cases stem from a single introduction into humans. This runs contrary to previous pandemics where there were multiple spillover events. What do you make of that?
I think we don't have conclusive evidence of that. So I would say I'm in the middle about that. We do have evidence from the wet market in Wuhan that there were a lot of patients that were in a ring around the market that seemed to be more than just by chance. And there were genetic material that was isolated in the market. But I can't tell you because we don't have enough data that it was from one event or more than one event. And it's hard to show that at this point because of where we are in the pandemic.
So the third bullet point says Wuhan is home to China's foremost SARS research lab, which has a history of conducting gain-of-function research, which means gene-altering an organism supercharging at inadequate biosafety levels. What do we know about what was taking place at that facility, Doctor?
Oh, we do know that they were looking at various coronaviruses and other viruses as well, not just coronaviruses. So I would say that it's possible that it was an accidental spillover. But again, I can't tell you for sure because we don't have evidence. I would say, however, that many cities do have virology labs like that stature, not just Wuhan in China, like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangdong province, Guangzhou. So there are many other large cities, even in Hong Kong, where there are big virus centers. So if you're in a city, it doesn't mean that that's the only place because it's in Wuhan that you could have gotten it from.
And just a sidebar before we get on to bullet point number 4, even before 2020, before late 2019, for guys like you, was it common knowledge that these types of tests were going on at facilities like that across the globe?
Yes, I think what the important issue is that we can learn if it was a spillover, or accidental spillover, that we can learn and try to enhance safety procedures later on for other pathogens. There are many what we call level 4 pathogens that are housed in labs all around the world, and they're very strict biosafety measures. So whether or not these were followed or not remains to be seen. But from all intents and purposes, what we know right now is that they did follow protocol like other places in the world with these level 4 agents.
Move on to bullet point number 4. Wuhan Institute of Virology, WIV, researchers were sick with COVID-like symptoms in the fall of 2019, months before COVID-19 was discovered at the wet market. What do we know about that?
We know that people were sick, but there was actually another report saying that they had other symptoms that were not consistent with early COVID. They were more consistent with milder disease. So if they had those symptoms now in 2025, I would say, sure, that could have been COVID. But if you had COVID in 2019 early, many people would be dead. So the fact that they had milder disease early in the pandemic, when our immune system wasn't that strong yet before a vaccine, seems odd to me. Again, I can't really say because you didn't have diagnostic tests then. But the fact that, remember, early in the pandemic, when people got COVID, it was really, really serious and there was a high mortality rate. These people did not have a high mortality rate, so it suggests that it was not COVID as an infectious disease doctor.
A lot of conditions have similar symptoms to COVID, doctor, correct?
Yes. I mean, I had a cold a few weeks ago that wasn't COVID. And, it could have easily been COVID because of how the virus is right now. But again, in 2019, before the world saw COVID with a naive immune system, you would have had much more severe symptoms than was reported, in my understanding, in those people in the lab long before the wet market cases, which were much more severe in December of 2019.
So the 5th and final bullet point, and again, there's a lot of information on the website itself, but we're just going through what's at the very top of the page. These are the 5 main points, I'll reiterate. The 5th and final one, by nearly all measures of science, if there was evidence of a natural origin, it would have already surfaced, but it hasn't. Do these things typically come out over time, doctor?
Not necessarily. Let's just take another virus that people have heard about, Mpox. We don't really know where it started still to this day. We think it might be in a small rodent in West Africa. But again, that exact animal where it originated from has still been elusive to this day since its description in the 50s. So I think not finding an animal that's the origin of the virus is something that is very, very common in infectious diseases. So it's not surprising. It would be nice if we had that information, but unfortunately, it doesn't move you one way or the other.
What is no longer front and center on the website? For example, I was scrolling through it earlier today. I don't think I saw much about vaccinations.
Yeah, so no information on vaccinations, no information on therapy like Paxlovid, and no information on long COVID, which is still affecting about 20 million Americans. So, I think that is the information that's not there. But, the information that you present is there. I wish that it would be more information apart from what was presented.
So is it, and let's just try and get to some sort of bottom line here. Is it possible to know whether this thing came from a lab or whether it didn't at this point? I mean, does there need to be more research? Is it possible to come up with a conclusive answer at this point from your perspective?
I think there's a very, 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 very low probability that we'll ever find the answer because a lot of the samples and the swabs from the wet market are no longer here. So I'm not, I feel like it is really important as a scientist and as an infectious disease doctor and as somebody who's gone through COVID, like many of us listening to this have, to try to figure out where it came from or why. But I'm not sure we're able to at this point. And, unfortunately, because I think it really is important for us to kind of process what we've been through. But that's kind of where we are at the moment.
Whether it was a natural origin or whether it was a lab origin, are both hypotheses reasonable?
I think it's reasonable. It's certainly reasonable that it was naturally, something from the natural environment, because we've seen that a zillion times in infectious diseases. I mean, all over the world, even Lyme disease or Oropouche virus now in South America. It is possible that it was also an accidental spillover from the lab because that has happened before in history. I do not think it was genetically engineered. It just doesn't have the features of that. But I think that possible accidental spillover or naturally in the natural environment and got connected to humans in some way, like other coronaviruses, those are definitely possible.
For those who weren't watching us in 2020 and 2021, Dr. Peter Chin Hong was helping us out regularly, figuring out what was going on with the pandemic in real time. Doctor, as always, it's good to talk to you. We appreciate the insight, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much, Austin.